Folks, I have with me today the Rod Martin. You may have heard of this gentleman before. He is one of the top entrepreneurs, one of the top venture capitalists in America. He was one of the founding members of the PayPal mafia with Mr. Thiel, and he has become a stalwart in conservative circles and loves to talk about economics today. We're talking about Trump's tariff policies. Rod, welcome to the show.
It's good to be here. Thank you.
Fantastic. Okay. Well, Rod, it's amazing that we hear so much about tariffs that just isn't true. You know, there are people going out there saying that, oh, it's just a tax on the consumers. This is going to spike inflation. This is going to cost jobs. The shelves are going to be empty. I mean, none of that is true. And Donald Trump gets it. And I've always gotten it from the start. I believe in supply and demand. And I think that, you know, when you raise tariffs on people, they just can't pass those on to the consumers like some of these guys are saying. What do you think?
Well, I really have trouble understanding where some of our friends are coming from on this. I'm a
Right.
lifelong free trader. I get the same thing the president gets when he went to the G7 in 2018 and told our allies, look, I went to Wharton. I get that the ideal outcome is zero trade barriers.
Right.
But they didn't want to listen to them because they're not actually using tariffs to raise revenue. They're using tariffs to block American access to their markets.
Right.
When India hits Harley Davidson with a 100% tariff, or when Canada hits our dairy farmers with a 280% tariff, they're not collecting revenue on that, not from us, and certainly not from Canadians or Indians. They are blocking our access. They don't want to let our producers compete in their markets while
Right.
they want to be able to freely compete in the US market. And Donald Trump has been able to figure out what apparently all of our wise men cannot, which is that we're the world's largest consumer market. They
Right.
need us more than we need them. And therefore, if pressed, they have to make a deal.
Exactly. We have a huge advantage over China. We're talking about that in just a minute, but many advantages. And one of those is that we are driven by a strong consumer. China is not. China is mainly an export economy, and that's why they're not as strong as everybody thinks. But before we get into that, let's talk about protecting American workers. You know, Donald Trump always talks about the middle class and bringing jobs back to America. He's only been in the White House for about 4 months now. And it sounds to me like he's on short about like $10 trillion in business. Everybody's coming to America. Everybody wants to open a factory here. We get that big steel deal up there in Pennsylvania. How does this all work? Why do tariffs make these companies want to come and do business in America?
Well, the first thing is the president's out there selling for us. And,
Right.
a long time ago, first job out of law school, I was policy director for Governor Mike Huckabee in Arkansas. That's one of the main jobs of every governor, to go attract investment for their state. And our presidents have not been anywhere near as good at that as our governors have been. But Donald Trump gets it. He understands. If he can go out and attract $8 trillion in new investment in his first 90 days, and I've seen counts that get it up to 10 trillion or close to it since then. This is extraordinary. It matters for American workers. That's hundreds of thousands of jobs. That's a tremendous amount of new manufacturing plants.
Yes.
Of course, the sales pitch is simple. No tariffs on anything you build here. It doesn't
Right.
matter that Japan owns it. It doesn't matter that Saudi Arabia owns it. Who cares? If you built it here, if you employed American workers, no tariffs. That's a big selling point. Everybody wants to be in this market. And yeah, some goods will end up costing a little more, but that will be because American workers are better, they're better educated, they're
Right.
more productive, and they're worth more. And isn't it better that we employ American workers and maybe pay a little bit more for a few things, only a few things, than those highly productive people be on an unemployment line like under Biden and Obama?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. What people don't seem to understand, the people that are anti tariff don't understand that this is a very complex organism, you know, this global economy where there's a butterfly effect. And you push a little bit here, it has this effect over here. has this unintended consequence over here. And if you raise tariffs on a nation like China, for instance, then they can't just pass that tariff on to the US consumer because we just won't buy it. Supply and demand.
Right.
Somebody else will step in, whether it be a US manufacturer or a foreign manufacturer that wants to relocate their factories to the United States, or a foreign manufacturer that can cut back on their wholesale costs, and they want to step in and take over that role. And this is why it does not cause widespread. Yeah, you have a couple of things, but widespread inflation, it doesn't cause it. And we just had 2.1% inflation. I mean, it's the exact opposite of what everybody said was going to happen.
Yeah, it is. And that's what we can expect. The danger of tariffs is really in the long run. And we saw it in the 70s. After decades of protectionism for the U.S. auto industry, the U.S. auto industry got lazy and unproductive, and their cars were junk. And so, of course, the Japanese came in and cleaned up on them. That's the danger. But that's not a short-term danger. That's a 3 decades from now danger.
Right.
And by then, Ronald Reagan, I might as well say Reagan.
I'm a Reagan guy too. I'm a Reagan guy.
We'll have negotiated a free trade deal with the whole world. It'll be ridiculous because he has already said that's where he really wants it to get. But if you line up first, you're going to get a better deal quicker than if you're one of the last in line. If you're a straggler, you're getting cut out. And that's a lot of incentive.
Exactly. And I think the amount of money, like we've floated the idea of, okay, like India, like a zero tariff thing. Okay, they don't have any tariffs on us. We don't have any tariffs on them. People say, well, wait a minute. I thought he was supposed to be earning money with these tariffs. But what people don't think about is the fact that if this causes India to open their markets to our auto manufacturers, we're going to earn far more than we would have from just some tariffs. I mean, it's just going to be explosive. And do you remember back when Barack Obama said, manufacturing jobs are never coming back? And what kind of magic wand does Donald Trump think he has, right?
Well, and not just Obama, but Bill Clinton made a big deal of that to the steel workers in 1992. And it was such a big deal that it made it into the movie about the Clinton campaign that, of course, used all fake names, primary colors. It's one of the main scenes in the movie. And this is what Democrats and Republicans alike have been preaching now for 30 years. And it's just wrong. There's absolutely no reason these jobs can't be in the United States. And there are exceptions, of course. We're not going to see textiles come back. That's absolutely true. We just can't compete on that. But I wouldn't guarantee that we can't compete forever as Elon rolls out the Optimus robots and all these different things come to pass. And while that manufacturing wouldn't necessarily create a lot of human jobs, it would absolutely enrich human shareholders here in the United States and improve their pension returns later on. So we shouldn't give up on anything. And Donald Trump refuses to give up all the time.
Yeah. Okay. Let me get your take on China. They put themselves forth as this global hegemony who, they're just, their whole, what is it called? Belt and Road. Is that what it's called? Their whole strategy, of getting these countries involved in these huge infrastructure deals. And then they can't afford to pay back the loans and then they own them. It's just a mess. So, for 20 years, they've been stealing our IP, stealing Europe's IP, manipulating their currency, supporting price supports on manufacturing to undercut everybody else, having very low wages, pollution. I mean, the whole thing. And, they act like they're the big guy. But I think Donald Trump really understands that they're not the big guy. We're the big guy. And we can make these guys crack if we just stand strong enough. What do you think?
Well, again, it's an export-driven economy. They make the money they make by selling to us, not only us, but we're 26% of the global economy. You can't replace us. They certainly can't replace us. Maybe if you're Monaco or Luxembourg, but certainly not a producer as big as China. They've got a ship across that Pacific. And if they can't actually get their stuff bought when it lands in California, they go into a depression. They cannot possibly sustain their current economy without us. And the truth is, maybe they're willing to do that because they're communists. Maybe they don't care. Maybe they're happy to make their people suffer. But in the process, they're going to lose the financial ability to invade Taiwan or to attack the United States or build a real navy or all the things that they're trying to do. This is exactly what Ronald Reagan did in 1985 and 86 in working out with the Saudis the deal to collapse the price of oil and thus dry up all of the Soviet Union's hard currency earnings. That, more than any other single thing, won the Cold War because they simply couldn't compete anymore.
Yeah, it really is. It really is remarkable. And, if China could get the EU and Africa and everybody else to all work together in a cartel, okay, and face us down, then they could do something. But you know what? A lot of these countries like Europe and so on and so forth, I think 400 billion a year in IP theft, they're tired of China walking all over them too. They don't want to do China any favors. And so, that's the thing. You just go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I'm just saying they're tired of the debt trap. And anyway, those European economies are export economies too. Germany is much more driven by exports than China. 48% of the German economy is exports. They can't export to China. They have to export to other countries in Europe and to the United States. And so there's no way to build that cartel. This is why BRICS is really kind of a red herring. They can pretend that they're building this counter US thing. And maybe if Biden or Harris are president, it could amount to something. But it can't amount to anything as long as the U.S. is actually aware of its own strength and uses that strength productively.
Yeah. You know what I think the ace up our sleeve is? Trump's ace up the sleeve? India. Because India wants to play ball with us and Japan wants to play ball with us. India is the largest population on the planet. The consumers they buy, they're not drowning in debt. They've got relatively low inflation and their GDP just came in at like 7.5%, 2 points higher than China. So these guys are on the move and they've got this plan, Modi over there, that's his name, right? Modi. They've got this plan where, they're going to overtake Germany. They're going to overtake Japan. They want to be a big deal and they want to play ball with Donald Trump. To me, this is tremendous pressure on China. They can't act like they're the big guy anymore because now they've got India in their rearview mirror.
Ron, when you add to that the demographic collapse that is already at the beginning of its cycle in China, they're on track to lose something between half and 75% of their population by the end of the century. And it's all the result of the one-child policy. And it's at this point irreversible. So they're just going to get poorer and poorer compared to their competitors over the next several decades. And they're really in a bind. But look at that Harley-Davidson tariff. Again, India puts 100% tariff on American motorcycles. Well, India has a middle class that's actually larger than the entire U.S. population. You might sell a Harley or two if it were fair.
A few.
And that's transformative for a lot of American companies if they can compete in India. And I just add to that one other point. We just had this skirmish between India and Pakistan, which of course is always scary because they're both nuclear powers. But the long and the short of it is the Indian fighters didn't do as well as they should have, primarily because they are Russian junk. And the net result of that is going to be a lot more Indian arms purchases from the United States. And that'll go a long way to erasing the trade deficit too.
Yeah, it really is remarkable how Donald Trump understands. He's a strategic thinker. This is my take on the typical liberal mindset, is they tend to be very linear thinkers. They operate in terms of the next news cycle, and they don't understand. They think, what? If we raise the marginal rate on millionaires to 50%, we'll get 25% more revenue. No, you won't, because they'll just take all their money and put it in bonds or move it offshore, find out where, go where its return on investment is better. These rich people have entire floors of accounting firms to make sure they don't pay a lot of taxes. It's not going to work that way. And so Donald Trump understands that. He understands the push and the pull of the economy, and he's really making it work. And I believe that Donald Trump sees this as this is his bucket list. This is it. This is the last rodeo. He's not running again, in 2028. That was always just kind of to poke fun at the Democrats. But he's,
Yes.
this is his last chance to get fair trade done. And I swear, I'm thinking he's saying to himself, I'm not going to my grave one day knowing I had a second bite at the apple, a second chance to be president of the United States, and I didn't get fair trade done. What do you think?
Well, and he's building an all-star team that are
Right.
all Gen Xers or even millennials who are going to be able to carry on that legacy for the next several decades. And
Yeah.
it's obviously very deliberate, and it mirrors how he brought up his own kids at the Trump organization. He is very focused on succession, even if he isn't talking a lot about
Right.
succession. But you're exactly right. This is actually a pretty brilliant administration. Everybody wants to cast Trump as dumb because the media always casts all Republicans as either dumb or evil. They were able to label Bush as dumb. They were not able to label Cheney as dumb, so they called him evil. And, whatever your opinion of those guys, it really doesn't matter because Republicans are always dumb or evil. Donald Trump is a brilliant, brilliant man.
Right.
And the more we see of him, and honestly, you don't even have to look forward. You can go back and read his books from the 80s and 90s, and it's just extraordinary. He's had a plan for 40 years and he's executing it.
Right, absolutely. And one of the things the art of the deal is, you want to seem a little crazy to the people you're
Yes.
negotiating with. 125% tariff. You don't like that? How about 225%? And meanwhile, China's thinking, wait a minute, this guy's getting ripped apart in the media. His own party's against him. Democrats are attacking him. He doesn't care. He's just going for it. It's like we better come to the table and make a deal before it's a 500% tariff. And I think that's one of the strengths that he has. And then he can back off. And they said that, Wall Street came up with the name for him because he keeps backing off on tariffs. That's the whole idea. The tariff is there to create leverage so you can have something to give up in a negotiation.
The idea that Trump is blinking on tariffs just floors me. Europe wasn't serious at the negotiating table, so he announces, okay, we'll just go to 50% tariffs. And of course they freak out because that would be the destruction of Germany, just for starters. And of course, van der Leyen is on his phone saying, hey, please don't do that. We will get serious. And of course he pauses the tariffs, but the threat is always there. And the threat is going to stay there so long as they are not playing ball. Trump is not looking for anything absurd or obscene or unfair. He's actually looking for fair. And a perfect example of that is actually his push for the NATO allies to step up and pay for more of their own defense. And I just don't get our pundit class going on. He's trying to destroy NATO. No, the United States was paying 70.5% of the combined defense expenditure for the whole alliance. All of these rich first world countries are just freeloading. It's absolutely obscene. And then we get into the situation in Ukraine, and they can't supply the Ukrainians. They've actually spent more money since the war began with the Russians for energy they shouldn't be buying, that they should be buying from Texas and Louisiana. They've spent more money on Russia than on Ukraine. And it's absurd. And Trump has called them out, and all of a sudden good things are happening. They can be partners, not dependents. That's the new rule.
I agree. I think this is the deal with this Russian war. I think he's saying to Putin, listen, you're not going to win this war. The West is not going to let you invade and defeat Ukraine. It's just not going to happen. This is a forever war. It's a meat grinder. Instead, why don't you get out of Ukraine? And you can do trade deals and economic deals with us. And I know you didn't get your prize in Ukraine, but your prize can be, and what you can say to the people is, you know what? We did all that, but now we are becoming a global economic power. To me, that's the carrot. What do you think?
Yeah, I completely agree. And I've written a lot about that at rodmartin.org. All your viewers need to come to rodmartin.org. We put out great geopolitical analysis every single day. And some of the smartest people in the world and senior administration officials and all kinds of people. And of course, me. And our take has been from the beginning Russia lost the war in the first 3 weeks when they couldn't take Kiev. And
Right.
and the reason I say that isn't that they can't stay in the fight. It's that their aim was to capture Ukraine whole and do a regime change thing
Right.
a la Bush. And they failed and they can't, and it will never happen. So, what can they get? Well, they could get Ukraine to not be part of NATO, which is something Donald Trump is very happy to give them because we
Yeah.
don't need that problem. They can keep a certain buffer zone in a handful of places that honestly are completely opposed to the government in Kiev anyway, and they can work out an economic deal that benefits Russia. And we're all for that because Russia is full, absolutely full of natural resources that we can
Yes.
help them profit from by profiting ourselves, much like the minerals deal in Ukraine. And in the process, you accomplish what Trump was talking about in Riyadh: commerce, not chaos. And the more you bring these economies together, the less opportunity and the less incentive there is to go to war.
Yeah, I believe that the Trump doctrine for his term is peace through prosperity. I think that
Yes.
that is his doctrine going forward. Okay, crystal ball is forming. 6 months down the road, where are we at with trade deals? Do we have trade deals with everybody? Are we still fighting this out? Is China still, cheating us on rare earth minerals? What's going on in 6 months?
We're going to have a ton of trade deals with major powers, probably the EU. I can't imagine we don't work something out with the EU. Certainly Japan, certainly Korea, probably India, almost certainly Vietnam, Argentina, Israel,
Right.
who have all offered, zero tariff deals. And I think quite a lot more than that, but certainly those. And those are the ones that are getting priority because, of course, they're the biggest markets for us and we're the
Right.
biggest market for them. I think we get that done pretty quickly. The media will pretend it's not quick, but everybody forgets he's barely been in office, but
Four
just a
months.
handful of months. And
Unbelievable.
comes together. And I think we get to an equitable peace, not a happy peace, not a peace we're thrilled with, but an equitable peace in Ukraine. And I think that just transforms a range of things that are thorns in our side at present.
Yeah, my joke on social media was that if the media was reporting back when God was creating the heavens and the earth on the second day, they would say, "What's taking so long?" You know,
Exactly,
they
exactly.
have
And
no patience at all. Yeah,
I mean, this is the most productive presidency in its first 100
it's
days,
unbelievable.
literally ever. I mean, it actually surpasses FDR, whose administration caused the invention of that term. And
Right.
so it's just amazing to me that anyone is criticizing the speed at which the administration is moving. There's nothing to compare to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, you're a technology guy. You're an innovation guy. And I think that one of the things that's happening is, China, they stole a lot of IP from us, but they were starting to actually develop some pretty good stuff, some good electric cars, some really cool phones, great infrastructure, monorails, all this. Okay. So that was good. New stuff that they were doing. But I think that was because so much money was pouring into China that the money was chasing the innovation. But if we can bring that manufacturing, that innovation back to America, I think once again we can take the lead in innovation, and we can put China in our rearview mirror. What do you think?
No question about it. Because look, innovation is as much about liberty as it is about anything else. If you're not free to voice a contrary opinion without there being some kind of terrible political or judicial consequences to you, you can't really be creative. And, there are a lot of brilliant and creative people in China, but they always know that if they upset the wrong apparatchik,
Right.
their grandchild won't make it into a good college, or something terrible will happen, maybe even a labor camp. And none of that is conducive to the kind of inventiveness and creativity that is just
Right.
native to the American soul. So yes, I think if we can keep China in some degree of just fairness, just basic fairness. First of all, increasing our access to their market, definitely would boost a lot of our companies. Giving them access to our market on equal terms is no problem. But in the process of reshoring a lot of that industry to certainly the United States, but also places like Vietnam and India, we deprive them of the ability to be the geopolitical and military threat that they have been. That's our fault. We built China as it currently exists, starting with Bill Clinton. And, those days are over.
Right. Well, people are much less likely to start a war with you if, you're like their bank.
Yes.
If,
Yes.
if they're making all their money because of their relationship with you, they're not going to start a war with you because, that would be like starting a war with themselves. And I've always believed that, and this comes from the human level up to society, up to governments, up to nations, that everyone will always, at the end of the day, seek their own best self-interest. And I think what Donald Trump is saying to these foreign trading partners is that it is in your best self-interest to work with us on this. Russia, you don't have to have this war. You can't win this war in Ukraine. Let's be serious. Why don't you get out of there and let's start building your economy and work with, there's no reason why we have to be enemies. I mean, we dropped 2 nuclear bombs on Japan, and then they became our greatest allies. We can make this work. What do you think?
I absolutely agree. And look, Trump has shown the kind of respect toward Russia and toward its president that 2 generations of American leaders have denied them even when they had it coming. There was no reason to be so disrespectful toward Boris Yeltsin. He certainly didn't have any more of a drinking problem than Kamala Harris, and the Democrats wanted to make her queen of the world. So, Yeltsin, who is a great guy, and he was key to toppling the Soviet Union, and he's trying to make Russia into a real democracy. And if you just go back and watch old episodes of The West Wing, you can see the just condescension and contempt with which Democrats in the United States treated Russia in those days, just kind of patting them on the head like the little brother. Well, the little brother never likes that. Never, ever, especially when they have an ancient civilization and tremendous art and architecture and a history of being a global power. And we're treating them like Chad or Niger. And it was just absurd. And it was wrong. And Donald Trump has gone a long way toward repairing that without giving Putin anything that Putin doesn't earn. And that's the crucial thing everybody forgets. Trump is the one who blocked Nord Stream 2. Biden is the one who allowed it to go ahead. Trump's sanctions on Russia were hardcore. Biden let up off that break. And so Trump has been exactly the Reagan model of peace through strength, trust but verify, the whole thing. And that can work, and we can get there. The Russians respect strength, but they want to be respected. And Trump uniquely can get there.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to let that be the final word, Rod. This has been great having you on. Rod is the CEO of Martin Capital, one of the founders of PayPal, and his resume is so long I couldn't even begin to read it all, but he's done a lot of stuff. So he's a great guy and a great conservative. Rod, how can people reach out to you and listen to your organization, read your papers, follow you on social media?
Check us out at rodmartin.org. We've added 20,000 subscribers to our daily policy analysis there just since January. And on X, which you can reach from rodmartin.org, follow me on X. We've added 220,000 followers on X since January. So clearly there's something worth seeing, and we hope everybody will come to rodmartin.org.
Fantastic. Folks, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you again soon. Rod, take care.
You too.